In this video, we're going to talk about how shadow work can radically improve your intimate relationships. In previous videos, I've talked about shadow work, what it is and how to do it. But just as a quick recap, the shadow, first and foremost, is our unconscious mind. And what is within the shadow is usually our behavior, or the behaviors, feelings, thoughts, emotions, impulses that we learn to repress at a very young age in order to stay safe or feel connection with our family systems and our caregivers. And shadow work is then the inner inquiry that we go into, getting to know our unconscious mind and getting to know what these parts of ourselves are. What did we repress at a young age in order to stay safe or in connection, so that those parts of us aren't trying to very heavily try to get our attention through our triggers, through self-sabotage, especially in relationships, through mystery, aches and pains and stressors in our body even, or through low self-worth and low self-esteem. These are the ways that our shadow tries to get our attention when we don't do that. So when we don't give those parts of us our attention, when we're not paying attention to our triggers, when we're not looking at why we might be self-sabotaging in relationships or sabotaging relationships, or why we have low self-worth or low self-esteem, or why we repeat patterns within relationships where maybe we have this pattern of going for partners that are quite distant and avoidant, and then we're the type that will be kind of running after them and desperately maybe even wanting our needs to be met. And this has been me, and it's something for me personally, I tend toward that type of relationship dynamic where I'm a little bit more of the anxious side versus the avoidant side. And that's what we're going to get into in this video, talking about how our shadow can either show up as very anxious, or it can show up as avoidant, or it can show up as kind of a disorganized blend between the two in our romantic relationships, which is then an indicator of how we learned to stay safe in our primary family systems. And this is the thing, shadow work around these parts and patterns within ourselves is so supportive and so important if we want to have deep relationships with others, if we want to have healthy, secure relationships with other people. And it's not necessarily just romantic relationships either. This can be in friendships as well. So let's talk a little bit about the attachment styles that develop as a result of insecure attachment from childhood. Meaning, if we grew up in a family environment where we taught that we had to suppress our emotions, we had to suppress our needs, we didn't feel safe to be ourselves fully, we didn't believe that showing our vulnerabilities would bring connection from our caregivers, or we were punished for certain things. This is all going to influence our attachment style. And just to give a kind of a context of what a secure attachment is, like if we have secure attachment where we feel in a relationship that our needs are going to be met, and we feel safe to express our needs. We both understand what our needs are, and we feel safe to express them. We feel safe to express our vulnerabilities. And then at the same time, we also feel safe and okay with being self-reliant. We feel good and safe about solving our own problems. We feel okay with having to pull back a little bit and not needing for our partners to meet those underlying needs that we might have that could be, kind of showing up in anxious ways. We feel like we have a good balance between the two, of both being vulnerable with our emotions and open and honest about our needs, while also feeling we are self-reliant and independent, and we can solve our own problems, and we don't always need our partner to be there for us, right? That is what indicates a secure attachment. And if we didn't receive that growing up, we didn't see that modeled to us from our families, this is where the insecure attachment styles will show up. And the insecure attachment styles are, again, as mentioned, anxious, avoidant, or more of an disorganized blend between the avoidant and anxious. So how does this relate to shadow work? Like, how do we actually start doing the shadow work around this, and why is it important? Because one thing that I see very, very often with both in my life, but then also with clients I work with, it's the stress that often comes from relationships. They're the ones that cause a lot of stress general in life. Like our intimate relationships, that's where a lot of insecurity, there's a lot of preoccupation with it, the frustration that we might feel from relationships if we're not communicating well, or we feel like one part is ignoring us and we're kind of running towards the other, or the opposite. This is an indicator of the need for some shadow work and inner work, where we then get to know the parts of ourselves that felt stress growing up, either by not getting their needs met, or they felt stressed having to really express their vulnerabilities and be really emotionally open and ask, like, kind of go very strongly after our needs in order to have them met. We didn't maybe trust that they would be met unless we made some sort of got our attention through really showing our emotions and our vulnerabilities. And that's more of an anxious style. Well, the avoidant is believing that our need or my vulnerabilities aren't safe. It's not safe to show my emotions. Usually I have to be self-reliant. I have to meet my own needs, and I can't ask for needs from other people. And that stress of either of those two things, where our nervous system is kind of wired to, I have to take care of myself all the time. And that, even though I know I have to do that, or I feel I have to do that for survival, it's still really distressing for my body and my nervous system, because I'm not getting the connection that every human needs. And it's also stressful to be kind of holding all these emotions and vulnerabilities down, or my needs. And then also on the flip side, the anxious, the stress of having to constantly feeling anxious of whether or not we're going to get attention, and needing to be like kind of preoccupied with our caregivers or other people in order to feel like if we're safe or not. How can I meet their needs and be there for them in order for me to have my needs met, right? So, and this type of stress and anxiety that can really affect our bodies. So tension in our bodies, like in our shoulders or our hips, or like this type of relational wounding, can really set itself somatically in the body somehow. And what I've seen from the clients I work with, it's not always just enough to do somatic exercises and to do only take care of our bodies and do the mobility and strength training that's really important for our health. We also need to take care of the stress that comes from our relationships, and look at the parts of us within ourselves that are kind of the cause of the stress in itself. And again, those stressors can then look at like triggers, they can look like frustrations, they can look like judgment of other people and relationships, and feeling that they're too needy, or believing they're too needy, or believing that they have to meet our needs, otherwise we're not safe, like they have to save us. Our partner has to be the savior for our lives, or we're not okay. And I'm kind of putting that in an extreme. I know that's not necessarily something we think consciously, but very often that's actually what might be going on underneath the surface. So just to understand that the connection between our relational wounding and how that can affect our relationships now, where the patterns of feeling like our needs aren't met, or the patterns of wanting to pull away and feel distant from our partners, and feeling kind of maybe grossed out a little bit, even some disgust around needing to be close with our partners, that is what causes a lot of stress, or it can cause a lot of stress. And then in addition to that, how that can actually cause stress within our body and our own kind of bodily systems within ourselves, and also our relationship within our own minds. So without making that too complicated, because the thing is, everything is interconnected and it's interrelated, but just to dial in on relationships and how doing shadow work is important, is that and how that will improve our relationships, is that if we take care of our own inner child's needs, first and foremost, we get to know what they learned growing up. How did they learn to stay safe or in connection or have their needs met? Did they have to pull back and be super independent and self-reliant? Maybe they had to take care of their parents more than their parents took care of them, and usually in an emotional sense. I have to be the emotional caretaker for someone else, and I have to put my emotional needs aside, which then can make me more of an avoidant in asking for my emotional needs to be met in an intimate relationship when we're adults. And then on the anxious side, where did I have to kind of really make myself known through really expressing my vulnerabilities? Was that kind of how I learned my needs would be met, through being very emotional? Is that the only way I knew like my parents or my caregivers were able to give me attention and safety and connection then? And maybe even we felt like a caregiver was overly anxious on us and overly kind of preoccupied with us and kind of coddling us in a sense, which then also can create an anxious attachment within ourselves. Like we adapt the attachment style of that parent, which then also reflects or can be reflected in our intimate relationships as adults. And all of this, like when we start doing the work around this, maybe sitting down with a journal, getting to know what did we have to repress within ourselves or amplify within us in order to get our needs met. Did I have to push aside my vulnerabilities and my emotions in order to stay in connection with my caregivers? Did I have to overcompensate and amplify in order to receive my needs to be met or receive attention? And as we start doing that work within ourselves, we start taking care of our own inner child's needs. Maybe we start learning to become more in contact with our vulnerabilities and our emotions. And through that, we then realize, oh my gosh, I actually have to start learning how to ask for my needs to be more, show my emotions more, show my vulnerabilities more, because that's also going to improve the relationship that I'm in. It will create more connection and more intimacy. Or on the flip side, we might see, where do I have to learn to be more self-reliant and more independent and be more taking care of my own inner child's needs or my own anxieties here, and feel like I have maybe less of a preoccupation with my partner, which is a very common thing for anxious attachments to do, to kind of be very preoccupied with our partners versus taking care of our own, what's going on within ourselves. We might try to fix them or try to make them do the healing work, or they need to change in order for us to feel less insecure within ourselves, and then start doing and meeting the needs that we have within ourselves and doing the shadow work around it in order for that to also then improve the relationships we're in. And this, before I end this video, it's just important to understand that, as you probably know too, anxious attachment styles usually attract avoidant attachment styles and vice versa. And if we're kind of more in a disorganized, we're to mix between the two, then also the same. We attract what we see, what we might be repressing within ourselves. That's kind of the interesting shadow work part of this. We are attracted to partners often that hold the things that we have repressed or pushed down within ourselves. If I'm in an anxious attachment and I've repressed my own independence and my own ability to be capable to take care of myself and meet my own inner child's needs and meet my own needs, then I might then attract or be attracted to a partner who is very self-reliant, who is very dependent, who might even be slightly distant, right? So it's a very interesting dynamic to go into. And I'm going to continue talking about this because this is so important when it comes to our own healing and our own development and our own growth, because intimate relationships is the most healing agent out there. I mean, that is where we're going to do the deepest work, through intimate relationships, because it is the most close to home. Like, it's where we learned our nervous system patterning. It's where our roots lie when it comes to usually our issues, when it comes to emotions and our own mental health and our own, even physical health. All of that is very much rooted in the way that we learn to feel safe in our environments, and how we learn to have our needs met in our environments. So from our family systems. Like I said, I'm going to continue talking about this. This is really, really important. And not only that, this is where it comes down to, you'll find as you do this work that everything is kind of within you. Like, you are the one responsible for taking care of yourself and giving yourself what you need first and foremost. Whether it is the acceptance, if it's the forgiveness that I've talked a lot about in other videos as well, self-forgiveness and self-love, like that is first, that's our primary responsibility. And also through that, learning to create safety to open up, to express what our emotions are and our vulnerabilities in relationships. So learning to feel safe within ourselves and learning to accept and love ourselves for who we are, and to do this very messy work, which shadow work often is, especially within relationships, so that we can feel we have more access to secure relationships with outside of ourselves, with our intimate partners, our friends and family, and then also secure, first and primarily, a secure attachment within ourselves, where we do the work that we need to do in order to feel like we love ourselves, that we respect ourselves, that we take responsibility for ourselves, and that we ultimately have compassion and love for who we are at our core. So with that, I'm going to leave this video. If you're curious about one-to-one work together, I'll leave the booking link in my bio to see if work together for a little longer period of time would be something that would be supportive for you and your healing and your growth. And if you have anything that really resonated with you, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. I reply to everything. And from that, take so much care. And I'll speak to you in the next video.